Welcome to the Your Houston podcast. This is your host, Nicholas Hall.
This is your co-host, Mario Castillo.
How are you doing today, Mario?
I'm excited.
You know, you're looking good. Looking like this weight loss challenge has really just brought some new energy to your life.
Energy, muscles, all those things.
You know, I really feel better. I feel like I have more natural energy.
Well, that's great given that you also have a birthday coming up, getting a little older.
You know, I don't feel it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's this challenge that's brought the best out of me. I don't know.
I will say you don't look your age. In fact, I probably look your age.
Oh, please. Come on now. We all know I'm old man. I'm Houston elder, right? We've got Houston's future and you're Houston present. So I do appreciate the sentiment. I very much am looking forward to spending some time and really meditating and getting deep on not eating sugar.
No cake, no berry chantilly cake from Whole Foods.
I am really committed to this challenge and I feel so good. I mean, I'm doing well. Why would I ruin it? Why would I spoil it at the finish line? No temptation. No donut cone, no nothing, no cake.
So what are you doing for your birthday?
You know, family, always. Probably some Zoom calls. My family has a tradition. We always call, and every family member calls and sings the entire happy birthday song.
Wow.
So I have a big, loving, beautiful family. I appreciate all your support, family. And so I will be having those phone calls and getting to, hear that song multiple times, which is very welcomed.
I've been a part of a few birthday Zooms, and they're just always a little awkward. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, well, my family's awkward, but it's something I embrace. It's who I am today. How everybody's got their family and everybody's got the unique characteristics of their family. So I'm very much looking forward to it. I am also looking forward to this weight loss challenge being over because I would like to maybe eat more than I have been eating.
Well, the finish line's in sight, so.
It is, and I'm running full speed all the way through the tape. So I hope you're ready for that. And speaking of family, we're developing an audience for the show. If you're new to the show, Your Houston, we're grassroots, nonpartisan organization. What we do is we connect people, bring them together so that we can really impact quality of life initiatives. And what's that mean, really? It means we try to make Houston a better place to live, to work, to be. And so our family's been growing, which is an awesome thing. And so thank you. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the comments. And we also look forward to adding additional members to our family.
Yep.
So hopefully this weight loss challenge has been fun and, people get excited and see how we can really get creative and incentivize and the things right now with society. It's just, we need more positivity.
Absolutely.
And so I think that these things are welcome distractions to really get our mindset reset and moving in the right direction.
And in a healthier direction.
Of course. So, like I said, if you're new, please like and subscribe. We've got a great guest today. We're talking about the economy. It's pretty much at the forefront of everybody's mind. We've got the person for economics in dealing with Houston, Ed Hurst. So
we're very excited to welcome Ed Hurst to the show today. Ed teaches energy and economics courses to graduate and undergraduate students at the University of Houston. He's authored and co-authored published opinion pieces on energy, markets, and corporate governance in national and international media. And he is a graduate and also the chartered financial analyst from Yale University.
Good morning, Ed. How are you doing?
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for being here today. Before we get to the fun stuff, though, I've got to ask you, are you ready for liftoff?
I feel the liftoff. The clock has started. Around here.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I love some corny music every once in a while, little sound bites. So first question, you get a free dinner at any restaurant in Houston. You can take anybody you want. Where are you going and what are you ordering?
Frenchies. I'm going to order the 3-piece dinner.
There we go. That's
All
a
right.
solid. That may be one of the most solid answers to date. I like that one. Next question. You got a private jet filled with enough fuel to take you anywhere in the world. Where are you going to go?
Paris.
That's gold standard. Good answer. If you could transplant anything from another city and bring it to Houston, what would it be?
Well, I've already done that. I've got a grapefruit tree in the backyard. So, second thing. Great question. Pepe's Pizza from New Haven.
There you go.
All right.
I like it. Food. That's a good answer. I think that's the first food item we've had transplanted. So now we're going to speed things up, get that gray matter moving, get the cognitive juices going. So here we go. If you could pick one source of news for the rest of your life, what would it be? And no, you cannot pick Apple News.
That's a good thing because I don't rely on Apple News. The BBC.
All right.
Great answer.
Next question. Have you seen the documentary Tiger King?
No, I have not.
Some would say you're not missing anything.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I may or may not agree with them. What do you think, Mario?
Is he missing anything?
Yeah.
If we're, hunkered up for a storm, might as well just watch it.
Hey, it might help with like relating to the student population of today's society. Next question, John Rawls or John Nash?
Oh, John Nash.
All right. Beautiful mind. I like it. Shipley's
one of my professors.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Was his roommate at Princeton.
All right.
And so Martin Shubik just passed away, actually this time 2 years ago, at the age of 93. John Nash and Martin Shubik and another colleague invented a board game in 51 called So Long Sucker. That's the sanitized version of it. Couples would come to play this game, and they would leave in separate taxis. Martin really, I think, got a raw deal. He was portrayed in the movie as John Nash's antagonist when actually they were the closest friends. They authored a number of papers together, including Martin taking Nash's Nobel-winning piece on non-cooperative equilibriums, and Martin showing how an irrational outcome was rationally possible.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think it is.
This is the Martin Shubik's dollar auction paper, which is a real short one. It was actually a subject of Engines of Our Ingenuity a couple of years ago.
Well, what would they say to this question? Shipley's or Starbucks?
Shipley's.
If you could travel back in time.
I'm going to go right back. Martin and one of his colleagues wrote a book, an article on the best pastrami sandwich.
Pastrami sandwich.
They were deeply concerned that all of the old delis were going to go out of business. So they did an academic paper on pastrami sandwich.
I think the new Katz's is about to reopen here in Houston, if it hasn't already. Speaking of pastrami. So next question, if you could go travel back in time, which college course would you teach yourself? And which course would you tell yourself not to take?
Well, I taught myself differential equations, and that's one I never wanted to take. So I would answer with that.
That's such a good answer. You answered this question with the same words. What's the lamest excuse a student's ever given you for turning an assignment in late?
With the number of students that I teach, it's not really a good thing if I know your name. And that does happen. So the lamest excuse, there've been a lot of really good ones. I haven't had the dog ate my work yet. What I have had is Oh, I didn't know there was a paper. Where's the syllabus? Uh, there was no paper assigned.
So just pure rationality. Um, so speaking of students, do you pay attention to the reviews on ratemyprofessor.com?
No, I think the last time I looked, which was several years ago, there were maybe 3 or 4 ratings, and it's like,
Oh, you got good ratings. We'll have to get together sometime and have a drink and read them together. There's some funny ones. Next question. We're going to elevate the level of cognitive matter here. Do you think artificial intelligence will conquer humans, or will we find a way to work together?
Oh, artificial intelligence is just algorithms that are programmed by humans. I would ordinarily expect that the AIs are going to be working for humans. Certainly, there was the TV show Person of Interest that ran for a number of years, which had the evil super AIs or ASIs, artificial superintelligence, that they were fighting against. Science fiction has a way of forecasting what's going to happen. We're only now getting to Jules Verne, if you will, in some respects, and we have the Dick Tracy two-way wrist radio TV. We don't quite have the maglev devices that flew him around the city. So potentially we could have some real issues with the AIs. We've seen the AIs applied in stock market trading and derivatives trading, and we've seen how that can actually get out of hand. And so when the algorithms, see one aspect of life, and they aren't informed about the rest of the macro environment that they exist in, they do the right thing. They do what they're supposed to be doing, but the damage that can be done because they don't see the entire picture is real.
Yep.
And so that's, what's a first order condition? Well, a ball hits the bat. Fine. First order condition. What's second order condition? Well, we saw a ball hit a stuffed bear in the stands here over the weekend, and the bear was knocked silly, but it's a stuffed bear.
I think I saw that on a baseball highlight.
There we are. That's the highlight of the season so far.
Yeah, with AI, it's definitely one of those things where it's journalism reporting and or otherwise humans reporting, and that's somewhat colored by, our own human condition. So next question, the future, will robots form unions or will they end them?
I don't see us paying robots anything offhand. We could pay the owners of robots. And so the owners of robots could direct the robots to form unions, I would suppose.
There we go. That was submitted by Houston's Future, and the future generations want to know about robots and unions. Last question, and this will kind of lighten the mood a little bit. If you had to take any first lady to the prom, who would it be?
Oh, my goodness. Any first lady. Let me think about this for a second. Oh, you'd have to take Abigail Adams.
Oh, there. Wow, that is a good one. Why her?
Abigail Adams might have been the one member of the family who should have been president. Certainly a pillar of strength, no nonsense, extremely sharp, very bright, and quite a wit.
So she had a beautiful mind. So Mario?
There you go. Well, Ed, thanks for being here. We'd like to get the conversation started by just getting your opinion on the state of the local economy, given everything that it's gone through recently with COVID.
I've been impressed by the local economy. We're a lot more resilient than I think we anticipated in March and April. Part of it was the PPP, the Purchasing Power Protection Plan, and then the direct benefits to unemployed. But this is not persisting. Certainly, hospitality has really been hammered. Restaurants, bars, hotels. retail shopping. This has been just an awful time. The oil patch, of course, has had a difficult time as well. The PPP, the Purchasing Power Protection or Payroll Protection Plan, really helped the oil patch. And so we're not seeing the full impact of the damage to the oil patch just yet. The oil patch had a miserable 2019. January was the warmest month on record and led to a decrease in worldwide demand of almost 1 million barrels a day. The Saudis and the Russians have combined to keep oil prices low. This is certainly in keeping with what President Trump has asked them to do, which is to keep oil prices low. And they'll keep it low through at least through the election. And so capital in Houston has been hammered, and that's just beginning to kind of trickle down to the population. But the population, on the other hand, was hammered because of the shutdowns. This is the first recession caused by essentially government orders, shutting down businesses, demanding that we stay inside. And this is for our protection. This is for national health, national security, public health. It's been extremely difficult to manage, but this is a recession that has started from the ground up. And so if you look at the wealth pyramid, the earning pyramid of the nation, the burden of this is falling on the population at the bottom end of the pyramid. Those who don't have 6 months of savings, those who don't have a stock portfolio. And given that probably 87% of the world's stock and bonds, or the US stock and bonds, are held by just the top 10% of wealth, it's really an uneven distribution. But everybody relies on the bottom part of the pyramid to do their work in the economy, which is buy and sell and work. And so we're having labor cut off. We're having lease payments missed, house payments missed, credit card payments missed. This part of the pyramid is not getting the direct aid that needs to be there. Instead, what we've seen is a lot of aid going to the folks who own the stocks and bonds. That's going to be just ephemeral. That's just air pumping up the balloon, but without any kind of base beneath it. The balloon's not sealed at the bottom. And so once the Fed and Treasury's efforts to inflate that balloon drop out, they're going to have paid once to keep the economy in place, but now they're going to have to pay twice, because the money really should have been going to maintain the standard of living across the base of the economy. And that part of the population has been ignored. We've seen really disappointing statements by some of the leaders, channeling Marie Antoinette. One senator simply said, well, why not give everybody $1 million? Such an arrogant, no empathy, but that seems to be the way of the congressional class, the senatorial class, Washington.
So with this disconnect, right, to where you've got on the pyramid, going back to the pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid, we're seeing some conventional thinking as to you got to prop up business, right, to a certain extent to keep people employed, assuming that businesses will actually keep people employed. And then now looking at the opposite end of the spectrum, which are the voters in general. And we've seen a deterioration in what I would consider the human condition, right? And this all ties into the economy, because consumer confidence has to be pretty solid, right? In order for people to be out there spending money, being active, and otherwise showing signs of a healthy economy. How much of a delay, so say that a new stimulus package were to come out that was to take care of the lower rungs of the ladder, how long of a trailing edge would you project before consumer confidence would start to get back to some form of a normal?
I don't think we're going to see a rebound in consumer confidence until we have some sort of evidence of an effective vaccine. I can see consumers becoming really tired of everything. If we'd gone into a full economy-wide shutdown in March or April, perhaps we would have wound up handling this better. Instead, the half measures that were taken really just didn't achieve what public health officials wanted us to achieve. And I don't know how this became a political football. Public health is fairly agnostic, Republican or Democrat. It's not socialist or capitalist. And it's not young versus old. And so this sort of short-sighted view, without understanding the full impact of how this is ranging across the economy, how it's essentially eviscerating the bottom layers and the labor force and the pyramid, is just going to prolong our recovery. We're now in our second political convention. No one is talking about restoring the economy, progressive fiscal expansion. The idea that, the quaint notion of the Tea Party that we should have balanced budgets seems to have been thrown out by the Tea Party itself. But this is a time when you use the nation's balance sheet to support the nation. And the reluctance of Congress and the executive to go forward with this is just astonishing.
When you talk about the hospitality industry, bars, restaurants that have been significantly impacted, do you expect those industries to make a full recovery anytime soon? Say there's a vaccine or enhanced therapeutics. When should we expect to see the hotel and bar and restaurant industry back to where it was pre-COVID?
I don't think we're going to see that. I think it's going to be diminished and diminished permanently. Maybe it comes back to 85% of what it was. We're seeing restaurant chains rationalize their holdings today. More and more people are taking cooking classes. They're probably going to like that. If I had to have a marker, I would go to what Southwest Airlines has done. And so I've had to cancel flights because, I can't fly to New York anymore because we'd have to be 2 weeks into a quarantine because our governor decided it was fair to open up. Now Texas is a hot spot. So if we look at that Southwest, put the travel funds aside until September of 2022, that's the best marker I've got.
Wow. So, if that's regarding travel, that goes to energy consumption. What do you see? So what would you say to our audience, regarding how much of Houston's economy is still dependent upon the energy sector? And what does the economy look like specifically for the energy markets and the energy sector going forward?
Our economy is probably 30% tied to energy, but of course, every part of the Houston economy is interlocking, and the natural gas is still being produced, the oil is still being produced. What's happened is the capital flow to drill wells, the capital flow to complete wells has stopped, and now we see more production coming online. Well, that's because $40 is greater than the cost of getting the oil out of the ground, which on a cash basis. And the cost of drilling, that's a sunk cost. What we're seeing is a consolidation. We've got the horrible example of Occidental that went out and bought Anadarko for $54 billion. And now Occidental itself has a market value of less than 10. This is a real challenge for the capital destruction in the oil patch. But this was all predicted. Anybody could look at this and see that the shale plays were the high cost plays. And I pointed this out, 8, 9 years ago, that going for oil that cost you $50 a barrel really made a company vulnerable to any price wars coming out of the Middle East. Our peak production was about 13 million barrels a day in February, pre-COVID. That's just 13% of the world market. There are a lot bigger competitors across the globe. And, their cost of getting oil out of the ground on full cycle ranges between $5 and $15 a barrel. So, getting set up to get clobbered in a price war is a bad thing. But again, so the Houston economy is getting hit there. Natural gas has been really pretty strong through this, primarily because natural gas is used for electricity generation. And that market has held pretty firm. So, the gas companies, certainly they've suffered from the price falling in natural gas, but they're still in business. And these prices declined a few years ago, so they're well attuned to that. I think Houston is getting and will be severely hurt in the medical community. COVID has overwhelmed the hospitals and the doctors, and this has pushed aside the normal flow of medical care in Houston. We've seen declines in elective surgeries. I mean, why would you go into a hospital deliberately to expose yourself for, maybe a hernia repair or a knee replacement? Well, I can put that off for 6 months. Apparently, the statistical analysis is that we're seeing fewer people in the emergency rooms and in the hospitals being treated for heart attacks and being treated for strokes. And so there's that shift towards providing more care for COVID, which, under the CARES Act and under state regulations probably doesn't demand or provide the margins to the medical providers that these other services do. We're seeing an impact in that part of the economy that, you would think, well, a doctor's busy treating patients, 18 hours a day. They're not making as much as they would be if they were treating allergies or, the dermatologist or the heart patients.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like a double 1-2 punch. And so you touched on something, and you put out some really good work in Forbes recently on carbon tax and really looking at alternative sources of energy. Do you think that this is the opportunity for Houston to kind of do that paradigm shift and embrace clean energy, if you will?
Well, I think clean energy is certainly the path forward. For more than 10 years, an absolute majority of voters has wanted to go towards a cleaner environment and reducing carbon emissions, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Majorities 55 to 75%, depending upon how the question's asked. Rational people can argue about how we got there. Certainly the path forward is this needs to be addressed and addressed now. The challenge with the new and renewable energy is that the technology changes so quickly that by the time we would set up the Nick and Ed solar farm, there'd be a new, more efficient solar panel being manufactured down the street, which would give a margin. So our capital would be lost. The rate of change in new and renewable energy is about 20% a year. That's really very, very fast paced. And so it's kind of like catching a falling knife. It certainly can be done, but you might get hurt doing it. We're seeing a tremendous interest in wind and solar throughout Texas. Now we're looking at coastal wind farms, which would tend to be coincident with peak demand in the afternoon. Can we contract with offtake providers to ensure a profit margin? Yes, we can. Is it difficult? Yes. Do people understand how this can be done? Some do. The city of Houston, for example, is contracted with renewable energy providers so that 100% of the electricity that Houston buys is backstopping or providing financial support for wind farms and solar farms. Certainly an electron is an electron, and they have swaps with the old coal plant out here off of 290 or the gas plant out off of 59. But they've more than paid for the electron that comes into the grid and provides the power for the city of Houston. And so in that way, we, the taxpayer, are subsidizing the renewable energy industry. We, the ratepayer, across ERCOT, for example, we have paid a huge amount of money subsidizing the transmission lines to bring the wind power in from West Texas to the consumer markets here. It's not always explicit, but that's how it works. Houston has been at the forefront of wind technology. They've been, Everett Horton, the second, had the patents on deep water spar rigs for drilling and for offshore platforms, and he had transitioned these to hosting wind turbines, and so they're being constructed in the North Sea as we speak. So there's a migration of technology to new and renewable energy. There are an awful lot of very, very smart scientists and engineers in the oil patch, and as the oil patch becomes less labor intensive, we're going to see a number of these workers transition to other industries.
Ed, what would you say to folks who are at the bottom of the pyramid that you were talking about earlier and are anxious about the economy and the future? What are some things to give folks optimism?
I think optimistically we can say that we're very fortunate that COVID is not a much worse virus. Number two, we've seen the strength of the Houston community. We've been through some very trying times over the last 6 months, and Houston is really doing a fine job of working together. And we were well trained by Harvey, and before that by Ike. The resiliency. Houston is a really young city, especially when you look at our competition: LA, Chicago, Washington, New York. And so there's a strong entrepreneurial bent to the city of Houston's population, and I think we have to rely on each other more. We certainly are having to cut back on our spending because our income is down, and to the extent that we can provide extensions and lifelines to others in the community, I think it will pay back multiple times once we get past this pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I mean, do you think there's any silver linings insofar as emerging technologies, or for one thing, and I'm kind of back up on this, I noticed that the student loan volume is 46% lower in the fourth quarter of this last year than the year prior. And so that means, if you just did the direct correlation, there's roughly half of the student body returning and or otherwise going to college, which means they would generally be participating in the labor market, right? In the labor force. So is this the time to go get new skills and kind of reset? What would you say to that person that's kind of reevaluating their own human condition, their happiness with their job, and say they were in the service sector and also attending college, bartending on the nights or whatever have you? Is this the time to embrace that new forward-looking technology, or is this another time?
No, I certainly in every downturn we've seen in Houston, and I've been here since 1982. We've seen an explosion of new technologies come out of each one in the oil patch and out of any recession. And I think we see this bottled up innovation expressing itself. And so there are firms that are out acquiring oil fields. There are firms out acquiring wind farms. There are folks looking to do renewable fuels facilities. Everybody who's had a job in a lab environment is certainly probably has a better mousetrap. Now's the time to go do it, especially if you've just been laid off. One of the cartoons that ran in the newspaper back in March was kind of a spoof. It's like, well, now that I have the pandemic, I should be writing my novel. And then the next panel was 6 months later, well, I should have written that novel. Somebody's writing a novel right now. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potters, she was destitute and on welfare when she sat down at her kitchen table and peeled out the first one. We're going to see some of that. I can't tell you where it is, and it's certainly going to be, I think, the outline, the exception. But what we will see is a number of folks, working from the ground up to build new businesses, whether it's construction, and there's an awful lot of home contracting going on right now. We've got a number of, Home Depot and Lowe's are doing land office businesses because everybody's at home and they've discovered that, gee, the place doesn't look as great as it should since I've got to be here 24/7. So there are these subtle shifts. The question is, will they persist, and will they provide the opportunities when we get to a post-pandemic world?
And what would you say on the state side of the response? How has that been? Is there more that the state can do economically to benefit folks who have been impacted?
Probably so. The state has unemployment benefits that could be extended. The challenge in looking at the unemployment is it doesn't really have a benefit for the gig worker, the Uber driver, the part-time bartender, the part-time physical trainer, folks who, we get paid with 1099s instead of W-2s. And, the world has gone to this independent contractor model. And you think, well, great, I'm an independent contractor. I'm my own business. The challenge with that is, when you don't have any clients paying you, it's hard to go into the unemployment office because you haven't been paying in unemployment. Now, you might through a Schedule C, and we know you've got to pay in Social Security as self-employed, but you don't need to do that as a worker and pay into the state unemployment fund. I think extending the benefits beyond just the labor force that's unemployed. So the folks, for example, who are laid off at an oil company, they qualify for unemployment. But the gig worker who's been piecing things together while she goes to school doesn't. And so there's one area where the state benefits could really make, I think, a very positive impact. And frankly, I don't think it would cost disproportionately more.
I kind of want to go back to the clean tech, right? The clean energy. And in your July 16th article, you write about, the really what's that mean insofar as the shift on trucks, right? And I think you touched on the technology, right? So the cost to actually do the technology. And then it's kind of like Thomas Kuhn when he talks about these technology shifts, the paradigm shifts, and the paradigm shifts happen more rapidly. And so it's capital intensive on these investments. And so, it's high risk. But I specifically want to go back to Austin and Tesla. What do you think it is that Austin was able to provide to attract Tesla that Houston was unable to do?
Austin is the, cultural beacon of Texas. The university setting, it's the home to the legislature. It's the home to the executive. Located in Austin for a company like Tesla kind of aligns the company with the community. Tesla is also a tech company, and Austin has a very experienced tech workforce that can be employed with Tesla. It's certainly going to be a little more expensive to locate in Austin than it would be in Houston. But I and again, you have to get to the personal preferences of the CEO of Tesla. and where was he going to be most comfortable locating this plant? In the end, it comes down to that.
So that being said, and being a business owner, you're going to pick the city that you want to be in, right? Um, does Houston remain the energy capital 10, 20 years from now?
I certainly think so. We have the technological center here. Houston is essentially the second home for capital behind Wall Street for the energy industry, and this goes with gas markets, oil markets, electricity markets. These markets were all pioneered here in Houston. The intellectual capital, the workforce is located here. Um, I think we stay that way.
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, we've one of the discussions we have is that we have so much infrastructure already in place. Why aren't we using the defense powers to otherwise be making some of these critical pharmaceuticals that we need, or what have you? I mean, that's still in my mind constantly. We should be working with a sense of urgency to do everything we can to get either and we're doing it on the vaccine, right? But to have like the PPE and everything else so that we can get people back to feeling comfortable participating in the marketplace.
Exactly. And it's just the allocation of resources. Dr. Peter Hotez in the medical center, the dean at the tropical diseases at Baylor College of Medicine, has been at the forefront of working on a new vaccine. He's already in hand, has the vaccines for SARS-1. Of course, COVID is SARS-2, and for MERS. And so there's certainly a similarity. Can he advance, their research to the point where they have a viable vaccine for COVID? That's the $64 question. But this is being pursued by dozens of research labs across the globe, and it's certainly not just the capitalist incentive of here I've made a fortune because I put together the vaccine that works, but it's necessary to lessen the disruption to the economy. The disruption to the worldwide economy has impacted everyone, not just your grandparents who stay inside or your children who are now underfoot, hogging the bandwidth. We had a nationwide outage yesterday on Zoom. What a surprise. Millions of students logged into their classes and back to school. And the miracle is that they were able to get it to operate.
Yeah, I guess seeing the positive side of something that someone else would be saying is a negative, positivity. So what would you say to the person that is saying, well, look, we can't just sit on our hands and wait for the vaccines. Studies have shown that not everyone's going to take the vaccine, and that the vaccine may only be so effective for such and such period of time. So what do you say to that person that really wants to get back to commerce and what they consider their new normal, which is working and buying and socializing?
Well, they can either take precautions or not. And so it's, I think the studies show that for those who are able to take the precautions, wear the mask, and practice social distancing, they can pretty much resume normal activities in the contracting market, in the industrial market. We see folks down in the ship channel and along the petrochemical corridor all reporting for duty in the refineries, in the oil patch, and they're practicing safe behaviors, if you will. For those who take a more cavalier approach, they're playing a game of Russian roulette. Maybe they're lucky and they would be, catch the virus and be asymptomatic. But on the other hand, if they catch the virus and have a difficult time of it, the impact is just not on them personally. The impact is on their family, their caregivers, and their employees or their employers. And so it's this social responsibility that seems to be at the heart of the arguments, the political dispute right now as to, do we get back to work? Do we not? Do we shut down? Do we go forward? And it seems that the unspoken consensus is we're going to try and get back to work, but there's this recalcitrant group that essentially believes they can go back to life as normal.
So since it's been politicized and since there's been projections, if things do get worse going into the fall, what's that mean for the Houston economy?
Well, it means the economy is not going to grow. We're going to remain at the current level of unemployment. We're going to see a huge spate of housing foreclosures. We're going to see capital taken away from the multi-unit housing. So, for example, apartment buildings, condos. It's going to be a very significant depression on the real estate side. We're going to see a decline in property values. This is going to lessen the tax revenues for Harris County, the tax revenues for the city of Houston. The city has been trying to get ahead of this by making some cuts, but I don't think they're going to be able to fully anticipate what the impact is going to be on revenues, especially as we get to the end of the year and assessments come due. It's just going to be a very negative blanket on the Houston economy. The restaurants that have closed down, they're not providing sales tax revenues. They're not going to provide revenues relating to property taxes. They're going to just leave the keys on the counter and go.
Wow. Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, but everything's trending in that direction, right? I mean, if you look, for me, the disconnect is, do I trust the data? Because at some point in time, rapid testing the CDC was directed not to count that in the official tally, right? So there's been a shift to the rapid testing. So if everybody's doing a rapid test and they're not using just the test that used to take 5 to 8 to 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks to get your results, and they're not counting those results, and all we can go off of is the rolling average on the death count, I mean, that's still subject to a 2 to 3 week lag in reporting from symptomatic to then being hospitalized. I mean, so that's the thing. We have not seen this with the flu season. We have not seen this with everything that points towards that, conventional wisdom would say in the fall when it gets cold and people are in the same space, it's going to get worse.
Yes, that's pretty much what the forecast is. What we're, I'm not so concerned about the positivity rate on the testing. What I'm concerned about are the number of people going to be tested. Most folks don't sign up to get tested unless there's a reason. You've got a cough, you've got something going on. And so as we go through the fall, I think we're going to see an increased demand for testing because the patient's not going to be able to determine whether it's a cold or ragweed or COVID because all of the symptoms kind of coincide at some point. And so greater demand for testing would indicate to me that there's something more going on in the health community. The mortality rate for patients who've caught the COVID has diminished. I don't think anyone can doubt that. And that's because the protocols for treating patients have improved over the last 4 to 6 months. But we're still losing a number of vulnerable communities that ordinarily we would have sailed on through a cold or perhaps the flu. This virus has a remarkable ability to spread, and if we don't tamp down and practice the sane social distancing, the wearing the mask, just to knock 20 or 30% off the spread rate, we will be in a difficult situation right around election time.
Yeah, and that's what's so frustrating is because it's been politicized. So some people are just going to listen to the talking heads because they put their full faith and credit in that specific party or specific leader. And so, for me, like you said earlier, this should be something that's agnostic, scientific, based by the medical leaders. And so that's what kind of confounds the situation and for me makes it, a wait and see versus extremely optimistic and thinking that things are going to get back to normal.
That's absolutely right. I mean, Houston is home to the greatest medical facilities in the world. And our leadership has especially in Austin, has chosen to ignore the medical advice of the institutions that we support with taxpayer dollars. That somebody with a law degree knows more than someone who spent 25 years, fighting viruses is just absolute nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I have a law degree. I may have stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but that does not make me a medical doctor, let alone one that's dealt with something, this pathogen, and something this capacity, magnitude. And so, for me, balancing the economic side of risk reward, right? And how do you quantify out the human life and the value of that human life? I have seen some studies that say taking out someone at the highest earning potential, whether they get this and die or they get this and they have a reduction in production or a reduction in capacity, if you will, because, they're only 25% of what they were. Have you seen anything that jumps out to you like that's really saying, look, we really should shut down and maybe take the hard medicine now, even though it's gonna be really painful for the economy, because we got to protect that labor force that may be in the 50s and 60s that is really the receptacles of knowledge. It's the institutional knowledge, and it has not yet been passed down to who may not be as vulnerable in the workforce.
This is something we'll only see in arrears after we get by it. What we have seen vis-a-vis the U.S. reaction and other nations' reaction, even though China has gone through an incredible shutdown, and now the economy is fundamentally free of COVID, at least from the data we see coming out of it. And so life is returning to normal there, and we're still well behind the curve, if you will.
But do you trust the data coming out of China?
No, I don't trust the data coming out of China, but...
and you read every other day. I mean, look at South Korea. They're now going back into a shutdown, right?
Exactly.
And apparently Vietnam's not had any, I don't think that they've had any deaths due to COVID-19 pursuant to their data. So, it's you got to have veracity here, right? And so...
Well, the good thing is in Houston, as an international city, we've got populations from China, South Korea, Vietnam, all living in Houston, and so you just kind of listen to what they're hearing from home, and that gets you around the official news agencies.
Yeah, word of mouth. I think 25% of our population in Houston is international. So yeah, it is a wait and see. In hindsight, of course, will be perfect. But I mean, is there anything else that's remarkable to you about this downturn versus what happened in 2008?
Well, yes. Again, this is public health downturn. It was and mandated by the reaction to preserve the public health. The national security, it's national interest, and so that's what makes this different. The downturn in 2008 was essentially a financial collapse. Caused by the overextension of loans when the Clinton administration changed the requirements for equity, and a lot of folks were able to buy houses without putting any equity down, and that kind of fueled a massive expansion in conjunction with the tech boom. And then when the things softened when the merry-go-round slowed, and payments became late, and then were failed to make it. They had all sorts of challenges supporting the financial infrastructure.
If you had to rate the financial crisis of 2009, 8, 9, and we're using the Richter scale, if you had to rate that on the Richter scale and then now rate our current pandemic crisis, what weight would you give those two downturns?
Goodness. Well, let's do a scale of 1 to 100, with the Great Depression as 100. And 2008, the financial crisis, we would probably, I would throw in at about a 25. And this pandemic is somewhere in the 65 range in terms of recession. The national impact of the pandemic and the amount of expenditures that we've gone out to do, this is on a par with World War II, at least to date. Could be more. This is, as an economic event, is certainly the most devastating that we've had since the Great Depression.
So, if it's a 65, are you factoring in that there is a double dip or not?
No, what we saw with the Great Depression was a precipitous fall and a brief recovery, and then the fact that Washington failed to address the root causes correctly, failed to put in place the appropriate responses, and then we had the second fall. I think we may be teed up for that, especially with the financial markets. At this point, the Federal Reserve is funding banks and investors as they trade their paper for dollars, and they take the dollars and they buy more paper. The Fed essentially is the one big provider of liquidity to the financial markets. If that's withdrawn, then we're going to see prices kind of tip over the edge, and I wouldn't be surprised to see another price collapse in the markets like we saw earlier in the spring, and see that kind of kick off right before the election. Now, remember, the markets themselves are not the economy. It's a leading indicator, and as most people rightly point out, stock market collapses have correctly predicted 16 of the last 8 recessions. So going forward, it really depends on how we support the base of the pyramid as to how quickly we can get back to business as usual. And unfortunately, the base of the pyramid is exactly where the COVID virus lives.
Yeah, and argumentatively, the base of the pyramid's not being fed. And so we'll see what they do as voters come election day. If it's not corrected from this, the bottom up approach in a timely manner, Ed, what would you rate that on the scale of 1 to 100 then, if we see this protracted and otherwise not addressed and corrected in a timely basis?
We're on our way to repeating the Great Depression at that point. The economic base of the nation in terms of manufacturing is just providing goods that folks can buy is much smaller than it used to be. 75% of our economy is service-based. And so, if you're not able to provide services to your tax preparation groups, how are they going to make a living if you don't have an income on which you're going to pay taxes? I may not even be able to pay taxes, for example. Everybody can just get in line. And so the circular flow of capital, of money, of currency in the economy grinds to a halt. It's not a question of going out and buying a meal at McDonald's. It's maybe I can get a loaf of bread and a can of tuna fish, and extend that through a day. I mean, this is the level where economic activity is ignored by Wall Street and Washington, but this is a level that the impact is felt most.
How much time do we have before it gets that bad?
I'm talking through my hat. 6 months to a year.
So there's hope. There's some time, right? Whether it becomes
there is time to act. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that it's important, though. But I just think it's important that everybody keeps at the forefront of their mind that it's the economy, stupid. It's really important. So, well, that brings us to this part of our show where.
Okay, we've had a problem here. This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
Do we ever have a problem? So this is where I'm going to give you a really ridiculous question in a very short amount of time to figure it out. I think we've kind of laid the base work for this. So I'm excited to see what you come up with here. So Ed, President Trump has decided to replace Secretary Mnuchin. You are now the Secretary of the Treasury, and the House and Senate have agreed to pass whatever recovery package you create. What's in it?
So I'm going to expand unemployment benefits across the lower part of the pyramid and pick up not only the officially unemployed, but the ones who are the gig workers, and provide some support for them. I'm going to provide a financial backstop, probably in conjunction with the Fed, for the owners of property. So, for example, the landlords. I don't want everybody's capital wiped out. I certainly don't want a whole rash of foreclosures and bankruptcies. I'm going to want to encourage new companies and development. So to the extent that I can, I'm going to ask the banks to provide loans to startups and loans to individuals, just as we've done for large corporations and small corporations, and have them extend this until we get to a point where we can say we have a vaccine or we're post-pandemic. So, 6-month to a 12-month policy of providing the financial support, borrowing against the future GDP of the nation to get us off the ground. We certainly have that ability. We can do that. And that would, put us much more of a vested interest in the local neighborhoods. We could, go to the banks. The banks would say, Nick, here's 100K. Go start your business. Here's 50K. Let's get this underway. And if you go perform what you're going to do, start the business, start employing people. You apply for forgiveness. That money becomes a grant to you, and it comes essentially out of the future borrowing. Certainly, the Democrats and Republicans have no issue with going to the national Treasury and borrowing to support this. I would expect that's going to happen. If we need to look at a way of funding this, this probably wouldn't come from a Republican administration, but I think we'd have to look at some way of providing a taxable increase on the 1%, the 10% who hold an awful lot of the capital in the nation.
Yeah, it's very profound and informational.
But the real challenge appears to have been the president, digging his heels in on the post office, which
Mario and I have a discussion concerning that on a daily basis. I play the devil's advocate of the USPS does not work, and he of course thinks that we need to support the post office.
When your motivations are to prevent and stall mail ballots from reaching their destination, I think you should preserve the post office. Absolutely.
Well, I think there's, we could argue that we could do couriers and, have somebody go through a neighborhood and collect them, for crying out loud. I mean, well, that's what we have with the post office. We could do that. I mean, the president sure as hell wouldn't like this, but Amazon, for example.
You just gave the answer that I give all the time. Why don't we just turn it over to Amazon or turn it over to somebody else that's been noodling on creating their own delivery service? Because as attorneys, we tend not to trust USPS, even though we have to get the certified mail, RRR. I usually send it certified mail with the return receipt requested, and I also send it FedExed and otherwise get personal service. But you just see some amazing solutions if you privatized it, I think, personally.
Well, and absolutely every time I've ever had to absolutely positively rely upon a delivery service to get it there, they don't. So
I'd prefer there's some really good insurance that I can get a timely collection on if they fail to deliver or lose something that's very near and dear to me. So you'd say the good faith, full credit and backing of the federal government's all you need, but I would say there's a time period of actually being.
So, and we actually have that, built into the Constitution, right? So voting was always the first Tuesday, second Tuesday after the whatever in November. And we didn't have the inauguration until March to allow for the counts, the ballots to be submitted to be compiled to go forward. And now it's, January 20th and the Electoral College meets right before Christmas to certify the election. So that we have built-in windows of time. The question is, will the local voting apparatus be able to manage this? And we've got a new voter registrar here in Houston because the clerk stepped down and we have an interim in place. I have no reason to think that it's going to be worse, but we had a number of problems during the primaries because we had cut back on the number of polling places across the Harris County area, which seemed to be just ridiculous. I mean, why should folks show up at a poll in the afternoon and have to wait until 2 a.m. to cast a vote? This is simple management expertise, and the fact that it was blown so badly is a remarkable condemnation of competency.
What say you, Mario, about that?
The official line was the parties, because it's a primary and they're held jointly, the parties had to agree on the number of locations, which they both did. But the clerk allotted the same number of machines for each party at each location, as opposed to giving Republican locations more machines versus Democratic precincts more machines. Even though that had been done in the past, she did not want any hint or air of bias to be around her first primary. So without considering the past activities, the past behavior, and the representation in the different communities of Democrats and Republicans, she absolutely demonstrated bias. Yeah, and that's, she resigned shortly after.
So she wasn't following Bayesian economics of updating her systems of belief based on.
When you go to, a park or a community center and it's in a heavily Democratic area and you have 4 machines on each side when you really need to have 8 and 2 or 6 and 3 or whatever. Same thing on the Republican side. It just didn't make any sense, especially when you had expected high turnout for one party.
That's just gross incompetency.
But which party did it hurt the most?
It hurt the Democrat side the most because they actually had a contested primary. They had enthusiasm and high turnout because they had a number of folks running for president and all these campaigns locally gearing up. On the Republican side, you had an incumbent, so you knew what to expect turnout-wise. And locally, there were only a certain number of contested races on the primary. So, going in, we need to prepare for this. And it was totally disregarded.
And would the clerk have known that going into it?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Do you think that all this is just symptomatic of the polarization of the political process right now?
Yes, and now the county's created an election administrator position to try and remedy that. They've taken some duties from the county clerk, some duties from the tax assessor, collector, voter registrar, combined them into an unelected bureaucrat, essentially, to remove the ability to screw an election up because of politics.
So what could somebody do that's out there listening and wondering, what can I do to make a difference? Whether you're Republican, Democratic, Libertarian, Independent, Martian, doesn't matter.
I would say if you have the ability, sign up to be a poll worker for an election. Learn what that experience is like and be of service to run a safe and smooth election.
Would you say that voters have lost confidence in the entire process?
No, I don't think so. But I for Texas, the process I think is really pretty straightforward, and we have the opportunity to vote early, and that's a magnificent opportunity for social distancing. The polls are open, a week to 2 weeks ahead of the actual election day. Everybody should be taking advantage of this to get out and vote early. My experience in the primary was, essentially strolling through, wore a mask, hand sanitizer, mask, rubber booty for the finger, and I was out in 5 minutes. There were more than enough stations where I went in, which was a county facility that was set up for early voting. That was not a problem. And I saw 4 people the whole time. That made it easy. And I think if the county can expand that opportunity for early voting, that will help us get through November, so that we don't have everybody piling up on November 3rd this year.
Yeah, hopefully if people are listening, hey, this is informational. Get out there and vote as soon as you can. It's kind of like the traffic. You don't want to be driving when everybody else is going to drive. And I'm not trying to tie it back to John Nash, but in some way, shape, or form it is. Ed, one last question. Have you in your entire lifetime seen the political parties so diametrically opposed? And I'm just going to use the word nasty with one another. Just it's gotten uncivil, if you will.
No, it has been uncivil. And we can look back to the Nixon era, which I lived through, Nixon and Humphrey, or Nixon, McGovern, Goldwater. And when he ran in '64 against LBJ, this was all nasty. George H.W. Bush, spread all sorts of scurrilous rumors around about Dukakis. This is gloves off. We just see a lot more of it today because social media brings it right to your door. It's just not, on the 6 o'clock news.
That's an interesting perspective. Or the president just brings it right to your Twitter account.
There you go.
Well, precisely, if you follow him.
How could you not? It is modern, just comedy and drama, and it's just that. If you ask me what I watch for entertainment, it's stuff like that. But I don't let it color my judgment.
Yeah, it's very much reminiscent of the late '60s, early '70s. Distrust in the government, distrust in the executive, distrust in Congress, distrust in each other. That was about when my hair was this long earlier. So yeah.
So the final question would be: would you vote in favor of term limits?
I think term limits in Congress, for example, is it's not a bad idea. We certainly see some members of the Senate who are well past their use by date. the feeble, unable to well, as some folks have pointed out, form a cogent sentence. I mean, I have that trouble on a daily basis.
I think we all do.
It's a young person's game. And, in 100 senators and 435 representatives. I mean, right? We've got more than enough young people who can do that job.
Well, hopefully this has all been enough to get the young people motivated and engaged and play an active role in the process. So apparently COVID, if you're playing the odds, generally stand the best chance if that's the case. It's just unfortunate, but I do think we make it through it. And I do think that it reshapes our entire theater and how we look at the world. So,
absolutely. That's what's required. Perseverance. The nation has been through a number of pandemics and epidemics over the last couple of centuries, and my parents had to deal with polio. My parents had to deal with the end of smallpox, but it was still running through the nation. Scarlet fever. Pandemics were the scourge of the United States in the 19th century. And for the last several decades, quite frankly, we've been very fortunate.
Yep. And Houston's got the medical center and has more than enough intellectual capital for solving this problem and others to come. And Lord knows we have enough resiliency. So Houston's strong. Thanks for your time, Ed. I really appreciate it. Catch up soon.
Thank you
so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching the show. Hopefully this has provided something that really gets you empowered, lets you understand that this issue is serious. It really is something that touches every life. And so please like, subscribe, share, leave us comments. We're here to really get everyone, bring them together and make a difference. So thanks for watching the show. Thanks for your support. And until next time. This has been another episode of Your Houston, the show where you make a difference.